This is Andrew Hada from Nothing Ventured Media. I want to tell you about all the feature films we've made and how you can see them right now. The last one is a zombie drama about how a pandemic and isolation could drive a group of people mad. When the virus hits, John finds himself alone and scared until he meets Michael, his protector. But when Karina, another survivor, enters the mix, everything that John and Michael knew will be turned on its head. The last one's a zombie virus movie that's somehow even more relevant today. Plus, it has zombies. Check it out. Borderland is a mexploitation film about living in El Paso. When Sarah finds herself in debt to the cartels, she has until sunrise to find some missing monies with the help of her executioner. Borderland is a true midnight movie and a lot of fun. The documentary Humble Spirits tells the story of the Hahn family, including champion Jennifer Hahn from El Paso, Texas. The entire Hahn family has grown up in the combat sports and has helped shape who they are both in and out of the ring. Humble Spirits, A Family of Fighters, is the perfect documentary for boxing fans of all ages. Finally, The Empty Space, winner of multiple awards, including the Sacramento Horror Film Festival's Best of the Fest, is a cosmic horror about Amy Andrews, who's dealing with anxiety and depression after a violent attack that killed her husband. As she tries to find herself, she starts to lose her grasp on reality. Or could it be something much more sinister? The Empty Space is full of twists and turns, with Grace DeWilder of Rue Morgue magazine calling it a powerful film full of excellent performances by practically every cast member. All of Andrew Hada's movies are available to rent or buy on streaming services such as Tubi, Amazon, and many other places. And if that's not enough for you, Hada Films is home to all of our short films. So take a look around and see what you like. Spend your day with Hada Films and Nothing Ventured Media. Now, let's start the bomb squad. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Bomb Squad. I was going to say the podcast, but we're the Bomb Squad. We're not any old podcast.
Yeah.
I'm Andrew Hada. I direct things like those two movies right
Yeah.
there. And that movie over there with the zombie. You'll see it. They're on Tubi. Go check them out. I'm also here with my composer, William Murdoch, and also Jay Whitney Amp. What's up, guys? So today we're talking about a 2006 film, Apocalypto, directed by Mel Gibson, written also by Mel Gibson. Oh my God, you'll never be forgiven for your crimes.
You could tell.
Written,
Someone else wrote it, actually. Say
Who
the
else
name.
wrote it?
written
Who
by
else wrote it?
Fahar Safina.
That was pretty good.
Gerardo Taracina, Raul Max Trujillo, and Delia Hernandez. That's right, buddies. I only messed up white names. I don't give a shit about those. And now, Joshua, why don't you tell us in ancient Mayan language what this movie is about?
This is about. It is a guy, Rudy Youngblood, the main actor you didn't mention, is the leader of this small Mayan tribe, and then the tribe is invaded. They are all captured, and it is a harrowing rush to escape.
Well, I want to use the words harrowing or rush.
It is a plotting journey to eventually escape.
There is a lot of rushing.
They're definitely rushing around.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're rushed.
This is written and directed by Mel Gibson. I will say that one of the big things about this movie, it's probably the least accurate historical movies, one of them. And Mel Gibson is kind of famous for not being very historically accurate. If you find out anything about Braveheart, you're like, oh yeah, none of this happened. And I mean, The Patriot is basically like what Donald Trump dreams about every night when he goes to sleep, but none of that shit happened either. And so Apocalypto, the only historical accurate movie he's ever done is Passion of the Christ, right, guys?
I've actually never seen that, although I did wonder how similar that movie is to this, because there's just long scenes of people suffering in this.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this. Was kind of the movie that Mel Gibson made after Passion of the Christ. He kind of had free reign because Passion of the Christ made like $1 billion, and
Yeah.
everyone saw it and also got really good reviews. And I think it was nominated for a few Oscars.
Right.
So this was like, hey, Mel Gibson, here's a lot of money. We hope you can make anything you want. Also, please don't leave your wife any voicemails. It's going to ruin your career. He only did one of those things, but
Right. Be cool.
So yeah.
It's weird to think about Passion of the Christ as even like a movie. Like growing up in like Bible Belt, New Mexico,
Right.
like that was like just an extra sermon that like it surprises me that people in like the Northeast weren't like watching all these theaters fill up with like field trips of churches and stuff.
And I think
like, doesn't
like,
even seem
at
like a
least
real
in
movie,
big
'cause that would be
masses,
nominated
but
for an
Passion of the
Oscar.
Christ was the first movie where like they were highly encouraging the churches to like take a field trip, like get as many people there as you can and go see it together. Which is very funny because
I mean, it makes
Right.
perfect
Like they were
sense.
giving out free
'Cause, I mean, and
tickets
again, I've
and
never
everything.
seen the movie. I've seen
Yeah.
clips. It's like a huge production by a good, like, you know, a guy who knows how to make a shot, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it's like that. But they've been doing like bad versions of that
Right.
for like 50 years until that point, you know. So
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that Martin
Right.
Scorsese is one of those hack directors.
I do agree.
That Josh. Yeah.
The Last
The church,
Temptation.
the church was definitely handing out
the
tickets.
church was doing something very opposite of handing out tickets.
First Baptist Church in Hobbs, like, dude.
Which is funny because it's a
You're
better
gonna want to
movie.
see this temptation.
But yeah, I think it's like, I think it had been the first
Yeah.
movie in a long time since probably Last Temptation of Christ. It really like, not only was it going over, I mean, was it talking about Jesus like just openly, but it was also directed by a huge director. I mean, up until that point, like Mel Gibson was known for like Braveheart, Patriot, like Lethal Weapon. Like he was, it'd be kind of like
Yeah.
Jordan Peele like making a super religious movie today. Like it'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Or Christopher Nolan, which he's kind of doing with Odyssey. But even then, the Odyssey isn't as, I think, like polarizing as the Jesus Christ story, you know? Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we're also removed. Like, no one
yeah.
believes in
Well,
Greek
I-
gods anymore.
and it's not-
There's like no controversy. Yeah.
Every day.
You worship Jesus and Zeus.
Sure. Yeah. I do when I go
equally.
swimming.
Well, no, and usually, like, and again, I've also not
Jay-Z,
seen
baby.
Noah, but I've heard people didn't care for Noah because it's weird and not. It's like Passion was an uncomplicated. Here's Jesus suffering. He was a great guy. Whereas Noah's like giants
Well,
were
that's-
real.
Everything in the New Testament is kind of like, hey, check out this happen. Everything in the Old Testament is like, is this an allegory? Is this really what happened? We don't know. Time to
Yeah.
get some rock giants to build the ark. It's like, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, but speaking about
I would
wasting
too.
enough time not talking about Apocalypto.
It's Apocalypto. Yeah. So Apocalypto also a historical, but
Yeah.
apparently with. So do you know what some of the inaccuracies are?
The,
Like I'm sure there are some. I
the
just don't
biggest
really...
inaccuracy
It's
is
mostly
that
just dudes
the
hanging out in
movie
the forest.
seems to not understand the difference between the Mayans and the Aztecs. The Aztecs were the ones who met the Spaniards, not the Mayans. They came like way before. So like by the time that was all happening, it was like way after. But this is kind of like they take things that are like like the Mayans.
They
we'll
just
get
pushed
to
it all
that
together.
there. But yeah, let's talk about this. So this movie, like,
Okay.
it's weird. It starts off, first of all, and I want to bring up this quote because I'm going to bring it up later. But it starts off with this quote saying, "For an empire to be destroyed, for an empire to be conquered, it first has to be destroyed from within." Something like that.
And then
then
that quote fades
Right.
out, and then it
Yeah,
fades
yeah.
in. Welcome to primetime, bitch.
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger.
Yeah,
That's-
one movie should be quoted by Freddy Krueger
Yeah.
at the beginning, but only if they have Freddy at one point in the film.
Right.
But then we cut to like this scene, and it's all these Mayan guys, and they have like a separate tribe. Again, we'll talk about it in a second. I just want to get through the opening of this movie, and they're hunting something. They seem to be more hunter gatherers, which
Sure.
we're already like the Mayan culture was more agriculture based. It wasn't
Agrarian,
they lived in the jungle, so they were clearly going to do more agriculture. But so they're hunting. They did do hunting. They hunt. They find some kind of tamar, which
It's
is
a taper, which
It's a taper,
you hate to see a taper die horribly in a
I
spike
know.
trap because they're such great animals,
Yeah,
So
and also they have some kind of saw type Rambo trap for the taper, and it's
yeah.
like what kind of Ewok level
Yeah.
trap is this?
They lead
So,
to it.
So then they're eating them, and then they're like,
I know, seriously.
yeah. They're
Raiders
like,
of Lost.
okay, as part of our tradition, everyone has to eat a piece. Hey, guy, you need to eat the taper's balls. And then they have like a very long discussion about it, about how to eat it. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, are we going to spend the whole first act just making this ball joke 100 times? Well, you're in luck, buddy, because it just keeps happening. So then he eats the balls.
Oh, there's also like a problem with that joke too, because he's giving out the pieces. He's like, you get the heart, you get the ear, and then he gives the guy the balls. But he says
they've
like,
already
"Not
tricked
this
it."
again."
Yeah.
So it's like you assume he's already given him the balls, but it's like the same
dummy.
joke. Like he's
the
done
dummy.
for this mockery
And so
once more.
Then
like,
they laugh at him.
I thought that I didn't like.
And then he then they go back and they find out that he can't have babies with his wife because
she's not getting pregnant.
We're not at 10 minutes yet, so I can't curse, but his male organ doesn't work for some reason. And then they like put peppers on it for some reason to like make it feel better. Then he runs out of the hut like, it's burning.
He's like Yosemite Sam, like, ouch.
And then there's steam coming out of him.
Right.
Yeah. And the whole village is laughing at him, even the children. And you're thinking like, is this character a main character? And the answer is no. Like, he's in it a lot. Yeah. But
he's adjacent.
You know what's weird though?
He's not really the best friend.
Okay, and I should say because this whole thing is like it's almost clowning on this guy for the first 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
First they prank him, then they give him something to help, but it just burns him. Like, and I assume that wasn't a prank, but it just didn't work out. I don't, who knows? But when I was watching this, I was like, oh, I actually thought this was one of those like, oh, there's no, like, I knew none of it was in English, but I was kind of like, oh, I don't even know if there's subtitles. As far as I know, this is just like guys getting chased in the jungle. After this first 15 minutes, there doesn't need to be subtitles because no one says anything. It's just like any characterization is done.
Yeah.
That first 15 minutes is like, here are your characters. Now it doesn't matter because all they're going to be doing is running and yelling. You're just like, why have it then?
That is one of the things that I do want to bring up. First Mel Gibson did say that he wanted people to watch this without subtitles for some reason. It's like, no. I do think one of the cool things to commend this film is that it is completely in like the Mayan language, which is pretty cool. But,
even if it's not authentic, it feels authentic in a way. If you don't think about the history or know enough.
But I think one of the problems with it is that it's almost like Mel Gibson knows Americans don't want to read that much. So what he ends up doing is he like limits all the subtitles to only the basic things. But the problem with that and the problem overall with the movie is that you don't really learn enough about anything to care about anything. Like the main character, you don't know anything about him.
Yeah.
The friend, like all you know is that his penis doesn't work and you're like, okay, I don't really want to know that. And like even the bad guys, like so we'll talk about it in a second, but like we'll talk about it now. So eventually like they get attacked by the Mayans and they get like taken over, but they are Mayans and like they live in the territory.
That's what I was confused about. Like are they all from the same
they're all speaking the same language.
Like
and again
factions?
Like at that time, I know that like now the jungle seems harrowing, but like this is where these people live. Like the jungles wouldn't be as cut off as you would think back then.
They're good at it.
And so like if you live within a day of a major Mayan city, they know who you are and what you're doing all the time. Like you're not that far away. Yeah.
Right. It's not just pockets of alien.
And they make it seem like it's a different like like in Conan, they get visited by a different tribe. And so it's two tribes fighting. But in this one, it seems like they just decided to kill one of their own group. It'd be like Donald Trump trying to like take over Austin, Texas, which let's not put it past him. But it's that same thing where it's like, why? Like since they don't explain enough, we don't even know why they're doing this.
I assumed the vibe that I got, and again,
Right.
this is, like I said, after all the bro jokes in the first 15 minutes, there's no dialogue, so you're just kind of getting vague context. But when they're in the jungle heading back, they meet this other tribe that's kind of on the run, and they're like, don't talk to them. They're like, they're captured by fear. Don't ever let fear like take root in your soul. And I got the sense that this main city like army is just like slowly coming out and like wrecking stuff and like enslaving people. Like they hadn't done it before, but they are now, you know, and it doesn't really say why or what, you know, they're like I said, there's not enough context, but I kind of assumed it was like they were encroaching.
Yeah.
But again, you don't really know because,
like,
I mean, one thing too, it's like if it would have taken them like a long time, because I think like what that kind of does effectively is like it does keep you in the dark as much as like the villagers are. Like they don't know what's going on or like why they're being captured. But like
because it is just one day before they get there, right?
Like, like this would
never vibes.
Right. But it's like if they would have like had to walk for like a 3-week journey or something, then it's like, oh wow, then we're learning more about other parts of the forest or like seeing other destruction that they walk through. But it's like it really doesn't seem like it takes that long to get to the big city.
It's that thing where, like, again, not to compare this to Conan, but at the very beginning of Conan, after the tribe kills Conan's family, there is a montage of them walking to wherever the tribe was from, and you see them go through different seasons. You see them go through different like terrains. So it gives you, and we never go back to that village. So it gives you that sense that we're in a completely different world. Where this one is trying to do it, but he has to get to the Mayan temple and back in like 2 days. So they can't go that far. But then again, you're not going to start, if you're going to start a war, you're not going to start a war with someone
like your villages.
Yeah, you're not just going to start a trade embargo with Canada. That would be dumb as hell.
Yeah. That'd be crazy. This is like this is like if they just like Brooklyn to Manhattan.
I kind of feel and it is funny because I thought
Brooklyn people love Manhattan people, as we
know. no trouble there in the West Village. No, but so like I thought from the context of the first 15 minutes, having never seen this before, that they're going to get captured, but him and his like 4 buddies who we've gotten like a little bit of characterization for would then like find a way to escape together. And, you know, like there would be, it would be like kind of a fun like adventure of like, we have to survive together. No. Once everyone gets captured, everyone's on their own, and none of them ever interact again in any way.
They barely talk. Well, and then there's before they get captured, like the Aztec or the Mayan warriors are like killing everyone, and then the main character has a wife and a baby, and the wife is pregnant. So for some reason, like there's a huge forest in front of them, and like none of the Mayan guys are even paying attention, and so he's like, "What should I do? Let my wife walk through this forest that we walked through a million times, or put her in a death hole?" And he decides for the death hole. Yeah, he puts her in a rock pit, and he's like slowly taking her down. And then someone sees him, and he's like walking, which is like it almost feels like Austin Powers level of like trying to build tension. He's like dropping a rope.
Right.
Yeah.
And even his wife is like, "Don't do this. Don't leave me here."
And then not only that, but then the guy, like, then he just kills him. And it's like, you should have just done that from the beginning. Like, why didn't you just kill him and then let the wife run off into the forest or whatever? Yeah, I don't know. But so then, like, so then his wife is in this hole.
Incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Historical inaccuracy.
So then his wife is in a hole, and they capture him, and they're walking, and he gets like a sign that his wife is alive. And so he's like, okay, I have to get back before it starts raining and drowns my wife. And it's like, another reason this plan was dumb. You live in the rainforest. The word before forest is going to be bad for you.
Yeah. But then you get, and again, this movie is 2.5 hours, and I do think a good 90-minute movie exists. Because I do, like I said, the production values are really good. And like, if you just speed, like it takes so long. They're like, they're all like hung by the neck to the same branch. And they have to like walk it along in this like slave, like kind of march.
Right.
That part is so long. It's
Because there's like a sequence where one of the guy kind of talks back to the guard, so the guard like pushes him off of the cliff, and then he's like choking, and then all the guys are like, we're about to fall too, so we're all in trouble. And he takes them off, then he throws them off, and it's like, hey, you guys didn't need to do this to establish these guys are bad guys. They just murdered every single person.
Right.
Like, you don't need any more context.
But they're kind of...
Yeah.
And this is like the one secondary, and again, there's
man.
only about 3 lines of dialogue, so you barely get this, so again, like, why have subtitles at all? But it's like the leader of this warband is the dad, and then his son is kind of the hot-headed, like, second in command who's, like, making mistakes, and, like...
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and because he's even like, take my knife, son, because you were so good at this slave raid, and he's like, thank you, father. But then, because then he pushes him off, and he like cuts the guy loose, and the dad's like, oh, so we're gonna do what you want now? He's like, oh.
It's also like, maybe you should have given him a knife before the job was done, Dad. There you go.
He also one of the 10 subtitles of this movie is they're like trying to cross this river or something, and like they mess it up, and it like causes a big like avalanche of stuff, and the dad goes, hey, I'm walking here. It's just like he's a New York guy. It's just like...
And even before they get to the city, then they like, this is, I think this is the kind of the coolest part when it starts here. But again, it like blocks it, because then they're walking, and I'll get more into this at the end, but they meet this it's like a lady and his daughter, and her daughter is still alive, but the lady has died of smallpox, and the daughter is like, hey, I can see the future now because I have smallpox. They don't say it's smallpox, but it's very clearly smallpox. And she's like, oh, I can see the future, and the bad guy's gonna die. He's like, oh, I'm scared. Let's go. Smallpox? We didn't have smallpox. Yeah. You had smallpox, Spaniards. You brought it to us. Yeah.
That was coming.
Yeah,
they accidentally.
They had to wait.
Which that is a good scene, though. It almost needed more just contextless, weird mysticism stuff like that to like be better, and just less people walking. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and see, like,
or like some like sitting around the campfire, complaining with each other.
Well, and I think it's like, they needed more of just like, maybe, and they didn't have to explain it, but just kind of like use the visuals to explain it, because then as they're getting to the city, they're getting closer, and the city's kind of building. You see like the crops have died, and there's people like kind of starving. Then you see they're building limestone, and like they're doing it the old-fashioned way where they're like grinding up the rocks, and they're like, but again, they don't really, you're not getting enough, and like we're seeing like, it makes it seem like that's very specific, but it's like that even the houses in the tribe should have had some kind of rock foundation. Like, the Mayans weren't some kind of like backward savages. They knew how to, like, the rain existed.
Right.
And like, so they do that, but then like it kind of undermines itself, because it's like, okay, well, you knew that they used limestone. Why didn't you use it for the tribe? Not that it matters, but like, we're at least seeing stuff that's like, oh, this is cool. Like, we're seeing how people get to it. And my favorite part is when they get to the village. You see the market, super cool. Everyone's dressed. Yeah.
Oh, like when they get to the
this is
town. Yeah, like when they walk into that, like that's when you finally enter a new, like they like walk into like a cloud of white, and like they start getting and like the dancers are all up in their face. Like
that was you're cool. Into like Mesoamerican imagery, like, this is like the best part of the movie, because it's just crazy. Yeah.
And then they like
and it's like beautiful, but also like so scary too at the same time. Like it's a cool vibe. It's uncomfortable, but
and they cover them in blue because they're gonna be sacrificed. Well, and they separate them. They say like, the men we're gonna sacrifice you, and the women you're gonna be slaves. Also, they didn't bring the kids for some reason. Yeah, they left them all behind.
And they left them all behind. Also, those kids could have helped the lady in the pit, because they were all left behind.
I thought that was good. But also, like, why didn't they bring the kids? Like, you would think the kids would
if anything, the kids would be the most,
Yeah.
I thought that there's a weird scene here, because the guy's mother-in-law, the guy who can't, perform, is like one of the slaves being auctioned, and they're like, hey, you want this old woman? She can cook and clean. And everyone's like, no. They're like, oh, I guess you're free then. It's just like, what? Is that how slavery worked? Like, you try once, and then you're like, nah, you're fine.
All right. Also, there's like a part earlier with that guy, and he's talking. They are around the fireplace, and he's talking. He's like, "They killed my wife. Before the night is over, I'm gonna join her, and I'll see her in heaven or hell, and I'm gonna take as many of these guys with me." And then it just cuts to the next day, and he's just walking. It's like, why even include that scene of him talking about he's gonna kill everyone,
right?
And he doesn't, and like he doesn't even like try. He just kind of like, I'll get to it, and it's like,
right, like showing him try and fail would have been cool because I'd been like, oh man, I'm totally demoralized now. Otherwise,
I know. It's like, what was the point of it? So then they get to the pyramid, which is super cool. And again, this is more Aztec related because they're killing like 1 billion people, which was an Aztec thing, not a Mayan thing. Mayan people would more.
I thought that they were Aztecs the whole time, but they were speaking Mayan. Because like it's so Aztec iconography, right?
Yeah, I guess I don't know the difference. Yeah.
They speak Mayan, and they have some things that are Mayan, but like a lot of it is Aztec because Aztecs were kind of the more brutal ones. And also Aztecs were the ones who dealt with Spaniards. They had more dealings with smallpox. Not to say Mayans completely different here, but they weren't as prevalent as the Aztecs were at that time. But yeah, they're cutting off heads, which is the coolest part. They're taking out hearts, and they're still beating. And everyone's painted in blue.
Yeah.
But the weird thing to me is that like the guys who are about to get their heads cut off, they don't seem to like care that like they don't seem to fight them. They're just like, oh, let's go. Like none of them. I understand that if you fight these guys, you're probably gonna get murdered. But like nobody tries. There's like 1,000.
And you're gonna get murdered anyway. Yeah. They didn't even show one guy try.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why. So like at least show.
Right. And at the beginning, they're so
no, go ahead.
Oh, what's it? Like at the beginning, they're so like they're not like super aggressive or anything like that, but they're like very.
That's what like
into each other and like they're all family and like they're good at running through the forest and like they're very active.
That they just give up.
It's weird that like
so
this
like,
is your time to shine.
You almost want the movie to not have the first 15 minutes because it sets you up for something that's like not the rest of the movie. You know, it's like totally different.
Even then, the rest of the movie doesn't work either because the whole rest of the movie is him trying to get away and he's like, oh, look at all these Mayan tricks that I learned to stop these guys. And hey, you guys are both part of the same tribe. How do they not know these things? But B, like it's not like you know in Rambo, John Rambo is like the reason that he survives is not because he's a Vietnam vet. It's because he's a highly decorated Vietnam vet who was specifically trained how to live in the wilderness without any weapons to like do combat guerrilla warfare.
Yeah.
This guy is just like a normal from the tribe. Like he doesn't like he stands out a little bit, but not really, not enough for it to like make sense. So like for him to survive and be like, oh, I'm smart and do all these smart things. Why the hell did no one else try to do any of these things? They all had the training, you know. So it's like you had Rambo style traps. Why didn't you like put him in a trap or something? Like I don't understand why. Like this whole middle part is just kind of like bad characterization, and it's because they don't have characterization. But it's just like they're just passively looking at everything when it's like, okay, but guys, your friends are getting their heads cut off. Your mother-in-law is going to be sold off to be a sex slave. Like, any of this going to register with you guys?
Right.
What's going on?
Right. I will say I did like the part when they were being led to get their heads chopped off. How they start seeing like the cave, like the paintings on like the walls, like they start seeing like guys that are painted in blue laying down, and like their heads rolling down. This is they're just like
it's like
oh my God. Like that was
again
cool.
if you almost tell it all through imagery, like it's like it almost would have worked better if just like it's all this you have to get it from watching it, not like I don't know.
Yeah. Which is what they were almost trying to go for, but then
it's halfway because
they don't go full. You have to
parts
go full
like that
force
really do.
That
You're like,
idea.
oh, I see exactly like why this is like should be working, you know?
Yeah.
So
well, see, then like the priest is super cool. He's like, he's holding up heads. He like drops them off the pyramid, and they like bounce. Like
it's funny. There's like a fat little like boy prince
cool
like
masks.
watching the execution. He looks just like the Rizzler, the little kid watching the executions.
And that's also what happens if you visit the Rizzler, get your head cut off.
I assume, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like that part is super cool. It's deal. Like that thing where when he just like when he has a goal to accomplish, and in this one it's to show human sacrifices. The movie works a lot better. It's that a lot of the times he doesn't have a goal behind, like beyond. Oh, just get him from this point to this point, and it doesn't really matter how he gets there or if it makes sense in the larger story. It just matters that he's there by the end of it. And I think so. Like this part's cool, but again, like so then they're gonna kill him, and then this brings up my other problem with this movie is that they're about to kill him. They like got the knife flip, and then there's like a solar eclipse, and he's like, "Yeah." The Mayan priest is like, "This was all part of our plan. That God wants us to stop doing."
Right.
Yeah.
We're sated with our blood.
And like again, that part's cool because the Mayans did have like almost a better understanding of astrology than we do. So I could see them understanding when there was going to be a solar eclipse and kind of planning human sacrifices around it. Because it's pretty well known that the Mayans would use their knowledge of astrology to kind of keep the masses in check by being like, oh, if you guys don't behave, tomorrow there's going to be a solar eclipse. And then the next day there would be one. And it would scare the people into thinking that they had control over it. So that part's cool. But this becomes a problem with the movie where the whole movie is almost by luck. Like everyone survives by luck. Like it's like taken to the extreme. And I think when you're doing like a chase movie, you get away with like a luck thing like maybe once, but then after that it starts to seem contrived. Almost every time he's about to like something's about to happen bad to him, he luckily gets out of it to the point where like then they cut to the wife like right after he's mysteriously saved by the eclipse. Then they cut to the wife. And then luckily just above them, two animals are fighting and one of them falls in the hole and she has like a big rock, luckily, and she kills them and then they eat them. And it's like, well, that was pretty good that like those animals were fighting near a hole they would never fight near. You know?
Yeah.
And I would like to point out one thing too, is that like, so before he escapes the Mayan civilization, we are at the halfway point of the movie. So we have gone through about 1 hour, 5 minutes. And then we still have a whole other hour left, and we've pretty much just described every single thing that happens within that hour.
It very
so long.
Yeah.
I fell asleep during the last half of the movie last night. I had to rewatch it this morning. So I was like,
but I did think because I knew this guy was the main character because you understand how movies work. I was like, oh, like during the eclipse, he's gonna like slip out of it, and they're gonna have to like chase him through the city. But yeah, when they just stop, I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess that also works. It's just
it's so funny you said that, William.
This brings me to one more flaw.
I did not fall asleep during this, but there was a point about an hour in where I was like, I'll just finish this tomorrow. It's like I just did not want to watch it.
Yeah. This is a two-parter. And it's like when he's leaving the village, when he escapes, it's like, so they first get to the city and they're already chopping off heads. So they already have other prisoners and there's just bodies on bodies everywhere. And then he escapes the field when they're throwing arrows at him, which is a good scene. It's a little,
he does
necessarily need to be there, but it's cool.
Yeah. So they
and then
hit him. Yeah.
He does he dodges that way. And then he jumps into like a ravine where there's like hundreds or thousands of more bodies. So they've been clearing out this forest for a long time. Which is weird because once again,
1 day away,
like less than a day away from this village. So it's like, did you guys just totally clear out the eastern half of the forest and now you're just getting to the western half? Like, this should have been your first target. These guys have been dead.
It's kind of like when you have to go somewhere and you're like, let's go to the farthest place first. So that when we go to the closest place, we don't have to drive that far at the end. That's what all of the Mayans were thinking.
It'll be fine.
It is funny because the
it's like going to
the only reason structurally that they had this like, oh, they're a day away is just because you like, oh, the wife's in the well,
right?
But it's like literally who cares, just have her escape into the forest, and then just have them like have it showing them like take like 1 or 2 weeks to get to the city, and then just show like, oh, they've been chasing him for a literal week, and that almost like ups the stakes to me versus like, oh, it's just like a day's walk, he just has to run a little bit,
Yes.
Or even like William was saying, why don't they, she's like hiding and then she has to protect the children. Because like, that also becomes a thing that we'll talk about a little bit more when we get to the end. But like, this movie is setting us up that it's called Apocalypto. It says at the beginning like a civilization would destroy itself from within. So the idea, it's like Mel Gibson is telling you from the start, like you should be caring about this entire civilization as a whole to see what went wrong or to see like what's happened.
Yeah,
but the characters in the movie are inherently selfish to an absurd degree, where it's like if she had been able to defend like all of the children, that would have raised the stakes a little bit more, because it's like she can only do that for so long. She's pregnant, you know. But because it doesn't, it's like he's just trying to get back to his wife, and he does not care which one of his lifelong friends dies in the process.
Well, they're all dead by the time he gets to the jungle.
Yeah. And it's like she doesn't like they don't even care that they left all the children behind. They don't even bring it up really. And so it's like, why, if you guys don't care, like if you care this little about like even children's lives, because even that little girl with smallpox, they just kind of like walk away from her and push her. Like if you care this little bit about these lives, like why? I don't care about you guys that much, because it's like you're not real people, you know.
See, and I mean, like totally, I said, because it is, I don't know, and like a truncated time frame does kind of like make it more ridiculous, because I do think like when they're chasing him through the forest, it's like that's almost the movie, because that is the last half of the movie, because that's like the series of escalating like attempts, and you're like, well, this should almost have, we should have gotten to this without 45 minutes of like walking, you know, like it should have like, we should have really gotten to the city in 20 minutes, and then like, you know.
Oh my God! He doesn't even, not even one night.
Right.
Like they truly, he's
no,
he's like 20 minutes away.
Right, but like if you show them like chasing him over several days, and like it also makes it like, oh, he's running out of time, they're running out of time. You know,
Odysseus was gone for like 50 years. This guy can barely be gone for a day and a half, and everyone freaks out.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's like if you're not thinking about the time frame, you could see why this worked. Like, you're like, okay, it's cool that he's like a Mayan guy fighting his captors in the because he does a lot of cool stuff in the jungle.
Yeah,
you know, like when he's escaping.
Well, and then like waterfall. So he's running away, and then like he sees a jaguar, and he starts getting chased by a jaguar, and then like the guys start chasing him. And then this is what I mean by like a lot of it is just coincidence, because A, he's getting chased by a jaguar. And B, then the jaguar, like, I guess the other guy forgot the jaguars are bad because he doesn't seem to care about it, and he turns around, the jaguar eats them. It's like, yeah, man.
In the face.
He runs right in front of the jaguar. The jaguar is chasing the main character. Bad guy sees this happening, runs right in front of the jaguar.
Yeah.
Like, let's get him, Jag. Like, he thinks the jaguar
is on this side. You guys are teaming up. You're wearing his jawbone as your necklace.
I do also hate, because we didn't even talk about this, but when he escapes, he like kills the son, and that's why the dad, like the war party leader, is so like, we have to get him at any cost. But he does the total movie thing where the villagers are like, I mean, he jumped off a waterfall, he's probably dead, right? And then he like kills one of his underlings for talking back to him, and it's like, okay, Darth Vader, calm down.
I know. And again, it's like, this is why, like, you can't do this when they live 2 blocks away, because, like, they should know how that waterfall is, how deep it is, if they can survive, you know? But they don't, they're, like, as confused. Yeah. It's like, that's why Tommy Lee Jones is confused in The Fugitive, because, like, he doesn't know if you'll be able to survive that. But these guys, it's like, well, we should at least see it, you know? Like, people jump off of waterfalls now for fun. But I don't, and then the jaguar thing, and then he's like running, and then he literally stops and grabs something, and he found like a frog, even though he was sprinting at full pace, and he goes and finds some like little picas, and he puts the
thorns,
venom on him, which is a cool scene. But again, it's like, why weren't you guys doing this before? Like, why didn't you have these ready to go in case someone attacked?
Right,
you live in the jungle,
and his he has a bee bomb, which I loved.
Yeah, he has a bee bomb,
or like the hornet, like he like wraps it in like a thing and then throws it like at them.
And then my favorite part is like after like someone, they all get stung, and then you just see them all running. You see this guy who's clearly like has like allergic reaction to bees, and he's all like plumped up and like got a bunch of like bee stings, and he's just really like, and it's like I'm pretty sure that the
Yeah.
Mayans would have just let him go home or killed him. They wouldn't have him running, like dying.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
he looks like the guy from RoboCop after he gets in the
You stay with
toxic
us.
waste. He's just like, you can't survive.
Right.
And then so he finds the frog. He does all the picas thing. He starts shooting the like poison tip,
The arrows, yeah.
but he shoots them all at the same guy.
Yeah.
It's like this was way too much time.
I know.
For what you used it for, buddy. No wonder you guys got captured so quick. But so then he like goes and like they're like fighting. Oh, and then like the biggest ending. I'm just gonna cut to the ending. Is that then we see like they get to the beach and again, they're hunter gatherers. The Mayan city's next to the beach. Their tribe is also next to the beach. Again, they would interact a lot, like the beach. Come on, like you can't even
fishing. Yeah, it would be a huge part of their life. No, but you should say too. This is weird because again, you see the movie takes so much time walking around, getting to the city, and then it really rushes like the ending because it's like literally him killing like 5 guys as his wife, like the thing's filling with water. And she has the baby as like it's filling with water, and you're like, wait, why did 3 things happen in the first hour and 20 things happen in the last 2 minutes of this movie? Like, it's just.
I love.
I know. I'm like, this is too much. There's.
And even like her son is like,
in the water.
It's crazy.
Like, that is crazy, dude.
But like, I don't know. It almost would have earned it if it's like a tight 90 where you're like, oh, we're just seeing these scenes like rapid fire, but you're like, no, you like made us slow down for the first hour of this movie, you know?
And not too like now. Let's get to the real part. The reason that the guy stopped chasing him. I mean, he kills the main guy and then he kills everyone. But the reason they stop chasing him because they get to the beach and then they see the boats and the conquistadors are making their way. Which I will say is a cool scene because you're like, oh yeah, they did do that.
Yeah.
But again, Mayans did not. It would have been the Aztecs. But also now we want to talk about
now the smallpox comes.
But this is my main issue with this movie is that it kind of seems pro-colonization. Like the thing with this, like I don't want to shit on Mel Gibson too much because he's a conservative. But I do feel like, I mean, we watched JFK. That movie's like by an insane libertarian. We liked it. So it's not to say that like if you're conservative, you can't make good art. But I think that this movie falls under that thing that conservatives do, where it takes away all the context, and then it just like it tries to give you facts, but without any context, and so those facts don't make any sense. Because this movie ends up being pro-colonization in a weird way where it's like
that's funny.
When you get to the end of it, you're like, oh, that's why we literally didn't see any of the like technological advancements that the Mayans have, even over the Spaniards and even over the Europeans, because this whole movie is like, look at these savages. They needed someone to conquer them. Like they were killing each other.
That's not what I took from it, which is funny. Go ahead.
I have a different
view. Go ahead.
View. So I do feel like on the technology side, yes. But there is that one part in the movie where there's like an old man at the first village and he's like telling a story and he's like, you will never be happy if you want more than what you need. And that will only make a hole in your heart. And so it's like the opening part is like this village is so happy and content. And like even this guy who has like ishy balls can laugh at himself with everybody that he knows. So like they're good. And it's like in a way that's like perfection. They're one with nature and the world. And then the city dwellers had the hole in their heart, and so they start destroying everything and they become awful people and they kill things that they don't need to kill. And then I feel like when they see the conquistadors, that's like they're
it's literally the end of all
everything.
Time.
They are the biggest hole in their hearts. So I could see both, but that's what struck me. I was like, this is kind of like we all need to actually go live in the woods and be more
peaceful, right? Well, and that's where I think and this is funny because when COVID first hit, I'm maybe like me, you guys got way into like, I'm going to listen to 12 podcasts a day just because I'm just locked in at home. I listened to the Always Sunny podcast where they had this argument where he's like, no, I think because Mel Gibson is so like evangelical, he is saying the Spaniards are good. It was Mac. So you're the Mac of the group, Andrew.
Yeah.
And I'm saying like, no, if you have to divorce it from that, because I don't think, I think it literally is like, oh, their life was perfect in the woods and like the Spaniards are just going to kill everyone. Now that the civilization has weakened itself enough, they won't be able to like stand up to this like threat, Hence the quote at the beginning of the movie.
And that's the quote.
But see, the problem with that is that they've already
quote,
shown the biggest killer of the Mayans and the Aztecs being a result of the Aztec tribe and not a result of the Spaniards from the smallpox. So it's hard to say.
They've already been.
The smallpox thing is, they messed it up.
So again, and it's also that thing where it's like, I don't know, that would imply that Mel Gibson, who's in a Catholicism, like a version of Catholicism that's so extreme that nobody takes them seriously because they're morons, would put the conquistadors in an evil light, which I don't know about that.
I think he's still. I think that's one of those like where you always excuse the evil parts of like Christianity past to be like that wasn't the real version. Like that's how I feel they're doing it. Symbolically in this movie.
Well, and again, I think the main problem is it doesn't really tell you what the point is. I mean, we know that the Spaniards are going to come and destroy the Mayans and the Aztecs and everyone else who's in that land. But again, like, he's still saved by them. So it's hard to be like, oh, well, he figured it out.
That's true.
He's kind of saved by luck once again.
And the whole thing, up until this point, all the luck was stuff that he had gotten from the jungle. It was a jaguar, it was this frog, it was the wife getting the thing. So for him to finally be saved, or it was all nature. It was all this, like, the eclipse even was an act of God. So all these things were act of God. So for him to be saved at the end by the conquistadors, what is that trying to say?
Is that an act of God?
And like, again, it would make more sense if he's saved by the conquistadors and they're trying to look at it like, yeah, these guys are here to humble you, disgusting savages. And again, and I think maybe that wouldn't have been my takeaway if, again, we had seen some of the stuff that made the Mayan civilization last for as long as it lasted. Because it was, the Mayans and the Aztecs had one of the biggest kingdoms that the world has ever seen. You don't get that by only doing bad things. There had to have been there
has to be some cooperation.
Their advances in technology, they're building fucking pyramids in the middle of the rainforest. You don't do that without knowing a little bit of stuff. And so if the movie had shown us how advanced they were and some of the good stuff, then I could see but they had taken it too far, because there was the problem of deforestation and all that. They're already feeling those effects of stuff like that. And we don't really know why the Mayans ended up taking off.
Right.
Yeah, it's all guesswork, right?
We need to know why they were capturing the villagers. We needed to find that out at the city, as opposed to it just being so vague. And then whenever they are when the conquistadors come, somehow main character gets away. He just runs out, I guess, because everyone's distracted by the boats. And then he's just with his wife and kids in the forest. And he's like, let's just get out of here and go start a new life. So it is true, that he did get pretty much saved by the conquistadors, because for all we know, they could go live in the forest and survive.
But that doesn't, he should have just defeated them, and then he sees the ships, after. It would have been, fine. That would have, the metaphor of the jungle saving him would have been...
That would have been, if he kills
and then it's just, that's the
Mayan
stinger.
Aztec people.
It's just...
And that's the end of the movie.
And then
it ends when the ships come.
Then it should have been Hernan Cortez, and he comes and he grabs a goblet, he's like, fine, I'll do it myself. And it just cuts to black.
Well, that would have been better, yeah.
It would have been way cooler. It would have been more accurate, too. But yeah, I think that ends up being the biggest problem with this movie as a whole, is historical accuracies aside, because there's not really any movies that don't have a lot of historical inaccuracies. But I think it's that Mel Gibson doesn't seem to really care about the portrayal of the Mayans other than what we already know about them. It's kind of he saw a picture of a Mayan sacrifice and he's like, all right, write a movie about that. And they're like, should we research anything? And he was like,
Right.
nah, we're good. You know, to the
See,
point where
yeah,
people
yeah,
kind of
and
know.
he almost had artistic liberty. Like, if you wanted to tell a story about how the Mayans were destroyed, it's kind of like, oh yeah, we don't know. You could have added whatever you wanted on there. The only thing you couldn't have done was made it about Spaniards, because the Spaniards were the only ones that we know didn't stop the Mayans. It was a different reason. And so, like, he had an opportunity to talk about the collapse of the Mayan civilization and even add his own spin onto what happened. But instead, he mixes it with the Aztecs. He gets, like, big stuff wrong. So it's like, what are you trying? It would be like, you know, if he did The Patriot, but, like, the main bad guys were from France. It's like, I don't understand what your point is.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
no,
there's a
wrong. Yeah.
But yeah,
Right.
no, it is tricky because it's more, you can almost tell what he's interested in is showing the crazy city and like the sacrifices, and then just like a guy getting chased through the jungle. But again, that's like, he doesn't focus on that. There's another hour that's not that is just very like, why are we seeing this?
String these scenes along.
And again, I agree. Like, I mean, I don't necessarily think more context could have helped, because the whole thing's so inaccurate that it's just never going to fully click. But
like, what would be context?
I almost argue
context,
you go in the other direction, no dialogue. It's all just imagery and stuff. Like, what's that show where the Samurai Jack guy? It's like a caveman and a dinosaur are friends, and there's no dialogue.
Yeah,
like, almost do it that way, where you're like, oh, I'm just showing you scenes. You take from it what you will, you know. And I'm almost like, do that. I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
that's what it seems like they wanted to do, but they just didn't.
Or like a Valhalla Rising type thing. I don't know. Just make it completely bonkers.
Yeah. Or even like, I would have liked if we had just stayed in the city the whole time. To me, that was the most interesting part. It couldn't have been that expensive.
They probably, I don't know. That city seemed very expensive to me. It looked so good.
Well, I mean, in terms of like, you've already built it. Like, how much more expensive would it be to use it for 10, 20 days instead of 40 days? You know.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, I just think, like, you know, and if you want to read about what happened to the Aztecs, I would suggest Fifth Sun, spelled S-U-N. It's a great book. But the thing that, like, in reality, a lot of it was the same way that a lot of civilizations get conquered, where they kind of, like, the rich people would rather assimilate than keep their culture, because their options was death. And to me, like, that's even worse. Like, they would kind of like it's why this movie didn't do that good, but Killers of the Flower Moon, where it was like you had to marry a white man if you were a native woman, so that you could get access to the funds that you own, because only white people could go to the bank.
Right.
And so they would do it, and I mean, if you've seen Killers of the Flower Moon, you know what happens to those women. And it's the same thing here, but of course, that's not as an interesting story as, like, the guys descending on the beach. And I think, like, but at the same time, like, this movie ends up doing a disservice to everyone, because, like, if I'm interested in the chase, I'm kind of put back by the fact that so much of it is convenient. If I'm interested in the Mayans, well, it's not even close. And if I'm interested, like, in the characters, well, there are none. So, like, what am I watching this movie for? And it's hard to really, like, want it when there's not a lot, you know.
And to, like, go back to that very first quote about, like, a civilization only dying once it's dead on the inside, like, showing, like, an alive little village part of the civilization doesn't really hit that nail
but I also
home
think,
as much. Like, if you'd have only seen like why the city, like, if it was all the city, you would see, like, all that kind of, like, turmoil.
Like the
why
poor
did this
can't live.
large civilization? Right. Like, that would have been more of, like, why did we start with this quote? This, like, the first quote at the beginning of the movie.
And I think, like, I know Mel Gibson in interviews, he said that he, like, wanted to find out what was happening to the civilization before conquistadors got here. But again, it's like, okay, but if that's what you're interested in, why did you not explore that in any way?
Why is that the stinger for the movie you didn't make? No,
Yeah.
I don't know. And I almost feel like, again, if the village was 2 weeks away, that solves a lot of these problems, because then it's like, oh, they're capturing people this far out, And it makes the chase seen way longer, so all the crazy stuff that happens, it's like, oh, this is spread out. We're just seeing the interesting parts, not, oh, he had like 5 crazy things happen to him in 45 minutes,
Right,
like
right.
he ran from a jaguar
He's
to
so
bees.
lucky he got kidnapped.
The
It's
only
just-
other way this movie would have been good is if the Spaniard was played by the lead girl from Amelia Perez, and she was just like always playing
Yeah.
the worst person in the Mexican history.
She's the villain of all
Yeah.
Mexican culture.
Yeah.
I would have loved
Sorry,
it.
guys.
But yeah,
But
I
it's
don't know.
like, yeah.
I remember seeing this movie in theaters. I thought it was okay. I did even back then.
It like blew my mind in high school. I thought it was.
I mean,
Wow.
it does look really cool, like
thought it was-
when
And I
things are
remember-
happening.
The
Yeah.
preview is mainly just that priest like on the top of the temple, so everyone was kind of wanting that. But like, yeah, I wanted to know more about the civilization and less about just a random guy who likes to run. And the movie never
Yeah.
really, and like now watching it this time, I was like, oh, okay. When you know what's gonna happen, it's even more tedious to kind of get through.
It for sure is.
And so, yeah, I don't know. I like when I picked this movie, I picked it because it's largely forgotten. It did pretty good in both like box office and reviews, but nobody talks about it. And I think that kind of ends up being the problem. Where like Braveheart is also not really historically accurate, but like they moon the English army and then they like cut off people's heads and shit. Like, hell yeah, that movie looks bad.
Right, you know what they're trying to do the whole time.
Yeah.
It's like a logical progression.
Yeah, exactly. And it is like
Braveheart rules. Yeah,
it's telling the story in a way that like you kind of like, okay, was that prince gay? He might have been, he might not have been, but the story they're telling helps to like extend that. But in this one, like, why were they playing with the limestone? Really no reason. That doesn't matter at the end of it. Why did that girl have
Yeah.
smallpox? It doesn't really matter, just something that happens. And so it's like,
yeah.
okay, but you're giving us a lot of information, but very little of it. Even like that guy whose pee-pee doesn't work. Take that, censors. Get around that one.
I know. We're so good at not cussing anymore.
I know. He like all that stuff doesn't matter. Like you'd think like I thought at least he was gonna go out like, I'll hold them off. You stay here.
Yeah, well, that's like if they'd escape
Right.
together and like, oh, slowly it's down to him, but like they all have a noble sacrifice or something. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but they just get owned instantly, and they're just not in the rest of the movie.
Yeah. And so it's like then it
Yeah.
feels like why did we spend this much time with this character and his marital problems if none of that was gonna play? Or even like maybe he had a
Yeah.
kid. And that's who the mom's protecting. And at the end, the main guy could have been like, let me tell you about your dad. He was a great man. And his penis always worked.
All the
I
time.
thought that if they if we were like a bigger podcast with sponsors, I was like, oh, this would have been a great Blue Chew one. It'd be like,
Yeah.
it'll never let you down.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Chew it and do
Yeah.
it, so your Mayan wife will get pregnant.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Get your mother-in-law.
But
off your back.
maybe one day.
And see, guys,
Yeah. Retroactively go back.
I'll tell you to watch Apocalypto if you want. Check it out. It looks very visually nice. But if you do watch it, keep in mind that to even discuss it, you have to make up Blue Chew ads just to keep the conversation going.
Right. Yeah.
Because you've run out of material and it hasn't even been an hour.
You're really quickly.
But,
Yeah.
but you're saying that, okay, and again, I just, like I said, I've never seen Passion of the Christ, so is that whole movie just like the scene where they're like being slave dragged to the city?
Yeah, that's my problem with Passion of the Christ. I'll do a quick Passion of the Christ review right now. Is that to me, Jesus, like it was cool that Jesus was a man and he got like, but him being crucified wasn't as interesting as him like helping the lepers and like curing people and doing all that and like showing you how
Right.
to
It's
live.
why they wanted to crucify him.
Yeah, and like that's why Last Temptation is my favorite because it shows like, oh, Jesus was like a regular dude who got horny,
Like a person, yeah.
who had to do
Yeah.
poo-poo and stuff, like he was like, to me that makes his story that much more tragic that he knew he came down here
Right.
to sacrifice himself, but he still had those human urges. If you make him into this character who's like, oh, you can hit me but I don't even care, then he's not a man, he's just like a god already, and so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And if you focus on the pain that he instructed, it's like, yes, he was here as a human and he did experience pain. But all the other, it'd be like if you made a movie about Martin Luther King, but it was only set around when he got shot. It's like, but this is really the least interesting thing about him.
So it is weird, like, because I do feel like Mel Gibson is like a director, does have a lot of technical skill, but you're like, why are you fixated on these things?
This one part,
you know? I don't know. It's strange, but yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
I almost wonder if with this,
I remember even like,
oh, go ahead.
Well, guys, remember like being a kid seeing the Passion of the Christ, and it's like I remember like people at the church were just like, this is gonna lead people to God, and like all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I finally got to go see it myself, and was just like, I don't know if this is gonna do it, y'all. Like, I don't know if people are gonna watch this and be like, that's my guy.
Yeah. I assumed it was for Christians to like kind of revel in.
I mean, that's what it was. I mean, I'm sure that like
Protestants,
80% of those ticket sales were going to people who were already sold on JC.
Well, and it's that thing where it's like, there's a lot of Christians. We're really going to do numbers on this anti-religion. There's a lot of Christians who like they kind of revel in like the punishment aspect of the religion, and it's really like even this week with Ash Wednesday, people were like, "Oh, we fast better than the Muslims doing Ramadan," and it's like, well, the second rule of fasting during Lent is that you're not really supposed to talk about it, and you're kind of supposed to do it on your own because it's a personal sacrifice between you and God. So by comparing it with a whole other religion, you've done it completely correct. And I think
it's like Fight Club rules, man.
Yeah, and Passion of the Christ is for those type of people who like want to be like, look at how much we do. But I think like again, that's actually why I went to seek out Last Temptation, because I wanted to find a better movie about Jesus Christ.
Oh, you hadn't seen it before Passion?
No,
interesting.
I
didn't see Last Temptation until way later either. I didn't see that till like probably college.
As a religious person, it's not like I always find it weird to watch stories about Jesus, because it's like I you see that kind of alternate reasoning behind making it, where it's like, no, you should kind of like it should be personal, I think.
Yeah, I remember seeing the Passion DVD at people's houses. I'd be like, lame.
Yeah, it is also weird. Like,
you guys got any good movies?
Like, hey man, after we watch,
I know,
Star Wars,
like how often
you
you
watch Passion?
Right, it's Friday night, babe.
Yeah, Friday night, watch Passion.
I always thought this was is crazy. The only other time I've ever seen a huge rush, like, because that was the big Christian thing, and this is El Paso specific. That basketball movie was like sold out in El Paso for weeks. What was that?
Glory Road.
Glory Road.
Glory Road, yeah.
It was like one of those like everyone was seeing it multiple times just because it was about like the UTEP basketball team. And I was just like, oh, what a weird thing to be caught up in, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one time when me and William were living in LA, we went to a theater and there was like a huge ass line. We were like, what is this? Because there was a line when we left. There was a line in the middle when I went to the bathroom. And there was a line as we were leaving. So as we were leaving, I was like, what movie is this? And they're like, oh, it's for Tyler Perry's Why Did I Get Married Too? And I was like, oh man, I didn't realize that Tyler Perry had
this was
big
a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But
that's
then,
pretty cool.
Tyler Perry filmed the movie here, and like I was reminded of how big his fan base was. Because we don't get questions about any other movies. We still get questions like, hey, when's that Tyler movie filming? They just think he's been here for 2 years still filming. It's like, he's gone, guys. He filmed stuff in like 2 days.
He's
good.
He's at the Starbucks still. He's like, I love El Paso this much.
Stuff coming. But yeah, back to Apocalypto. You can watch it, I guess.
I'm getting so distracted.
I know.
It's long. It's a long movie, guys.
It is too long. I feel like there is good there, but it's very truncated between weird.
The reason I went after it maybe a little bit harder is because there's not that many movies about Mayans. Like, again, going back to Braveheart, like if you don't like Braveheart, there's like a million movies about Scottish and English, like that time, like medieval times. You can watch, There's probably other movies about William Wallace. But there's not really that many movies, especially on this level. And so it does kind of feel a little bit like Mel Gibson had this shot to do something that no one had ever done. And for this to be the result is pretty disappointing, It's like,
I get it. It's like when they finally made a He-Man movie and it was the He-Man movie that exists. You're like, oh,
we reviewed,
Yeah,
and I think
check our review here.
Again, I think even if he had done this as well as possible, I would have been like, yeah, but like, why didn't you stay in the village?
Right. I feel like whenever I saw this in high school, it worked for me. It was the story that we want. And then I rewatched it, I think, during like COVID maybe. And I was like, this is kind of boring, but maybe I'm just distracted. So I just like didn't even finish it. But watching it this time, I was like, once you've seen, I don't know, once you're a better movie watcher, it's just like this just does not hold up in court. Like, there's just so much nonsense, and it's not as impressive as it seems.
Yeah.
And it's like they could have gone full force on the trick, but they didn't. So it just kind of seems like a half-assed Hollywood production of like a cooler, I don't know, more or less studio-based film.
Yeah. And again, I think it would have worked like if that Jaguar had looked at the guy and like done like a little like, the forest is with you, buddy. Like,
it's more like up the mysticism for sure.
I would have rather had like a Clash of the Titans style version of this movie where like the Aztec gods were like coming to life, like that big lion type thing, than what we got in this. Or a historical Dracula one. Either way, you got two options.
Right.
You fail.
Make this museum quality.
Yeah, it's in the middle of every possible, like, cause it's not a buddy movie, it's not an escape movie, it's like half of everything, you know.
Yeah.
It hints at other things, but I don't know. It is frustrating because, like I said, I do think technically, when he's like zeroed in on something, it is really working, and then you're just like, well, then why the last 30 minutes? Am I, you know?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I know.
Right.
But thank you guys for joining us. This ends between the island of Dr. Monroe, or Dr. Moreau, Inherent Vice, and now Apocalypto. This ends our series on titles that Andrew cannot spell and needs to double check like 3 times. So join us next week when we go back to regular
Saw. It's just going to be Saw, the easiest possible title.
Every time I had to type Apocalypto in there, I had to fucking look it up and just guess.
Acapulco. Apocalypto.
I just ended up listening to Welcome to that Bob Dylan song. You know which one I'm talking about. Going down a, what's it called?
No, you were jamming Imagine Dragons with the Apocalypse.
It's funny when you look up the Wikipedia for this, it's like, for the Law and Order Criminal Intent episode, see this. It's like, these are the 2 apocalypses that exist.
The Bob Dylan song I was thinking of was Going Down to Acapulco.
Acapulco.
Yeah, which is very simple. That's what this movie should have been called.
Acapulco. That's a good song.
Yeah, it's the one good part of that other Bob Dylan movie.
Jim James does the cover, I think.
Yeah, that's like the only good part.
That is my favorite song from that soundtrack.
So next week we're going to review both Bob Dylan movies.
See you on that one. No, we won't.
We'll put ourselves to sleep.
On the Bob Squad.
The Bob Squad.
Josh is going to review those movies by himself.
They're both bad. That's my review.
Bye.